So, welcome, Kat, and I'll just hand it over to you, and you can tell us all about what a health coach does and your story as well.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks very much for that welcome. And thank you to the CCI and Ticna communities for inviting me. Everyone who's here live, thank you very much. And for those watching the recording. So I'm going to tell you how I came to be living my second life. And also what helped in my healing journey, what a holistic health coach is, and what a functional medicine health coach is. And I'll introduce you to the functional medicine 5 pillars of health and invite you to join me in a nervous system exercise, which addresses one of these pillars, which is stress reduction. And I just want to reiterate, as Peter said in the introduction to this talk that I'm not a medical practitioner. I don't diagnose or prescribe. So this talk is for educational purposes only. So my name is Cat Smit. I'm a former psychologist turned holistic health coach. I'm a functional medicine certified health coach, and I have a grad dip in psychological practice. I also live on a beautiful eco community in the hinterland of the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, and I love to walk in nature, dance, grow food, work and celebrate with people in community. So as I was saying at the beginning of this talk, stress reduction, or I'd prefer to call it nervous system regulation, is and was and still is a crucial piece for me in my ongoing healing journey. So actually giving a talk to you all today is pretty new to me, and dealing with all the technology. So my nervous system is actually a little bit overstimulated right now, but it's important for me to contribute. So that's my motivation for doing this, despite the nerves. And that comes a bit from acceptance and commitment therapy. So I'll tell you a little bit more of that about that at the end. So I use it on myself. So for both me and for you guys to really arrive here this morning and to be in a grounded, open state, let's firstly do this nervous system practice right now, if you're willing for me to guide you through. So I'd invite you first to close your eyes if you're comfortable with that. Feel your feet on the floor, everything that's touching your seat, having an upright but not stiff spine. And also, if it's more comfortable for you to lie down, that's totally fine, but just make sure you have an aligned spine on the floor. So I'm going to ask you to focus on your breath. But if this feels all uncomfortable or triggering for you in any way, just ignore what I'm saying about the breath and stay with that feeling of your feet on the floor, your bum on the seat, your back pressing against the seat, or the sensations of lying on the floor. And just stay as much as you can with those grounding sensations. And otherwise, if you are comfortable to focus on your breath, I'd invite you to put one hand on your belly and one hand in the middle of your chest or your heart center. And then tuning into your breath, feeling the rising of either your chest or your stomach going out on an in-breath and back into your spine on an out-breath. And just notice, without judging, whether there's actually more movement in the hand on your belly or the hand on your chest. So is your breath higher in your chest right now, which is more associated with the fight or flight nervous system state, or is it lower in your abdomen right now, which is more associated with the rest, digest, and heal parasympathetic state? So just noticing. No right or wrong. It's just what it is right now. And notice as we just sit here, allowing the breath to come and go, whether your breath actually just naturally starts to slow down and drop deeper down into your belly. And it's okay if it doesn't, just noticing if it's naturally doing that. So sooner or later, whether it does or it doesn't, this is diaphragmatic or belly breathing, which activates that parasympathetic or rest, digest, and heal part of our nervous system. So I can notice that I've got a bit more breath up in my chest still at the moment. So I'm not judging that, I'm just noticing that that's what's happening right now. Now you can drop your hands into your lap now if you prefer, or keep them where they are, whatever's more comfortable. And I would invite you to gently lengthen your out breath by breathing out as if through a straw with pursed lips. So still, we're going to breathe in for a deep in breath, belly breath, and then this is the sound through pursed lips. So counting in for 3, 2, 1, and in breath, then out 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and in 2, 3, and out 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and in 2, 3, and out 4, 3, 2, 1. So just do that yourself, finding a ratio that's actually right for you, that actually is relaxing for you, so that the out breath, what we're aiming for, that it's 1.5 to 2 times longer. But with any of these tools, find what's right for you, what actually helps you to deeply breathe into your belly and long, slow out breaths. And if you prefer, you can breathe in and out through your nose as well. That's fine too. And as I said before, or you can just focus on the sensations. So inviting our breath to be longer than our in-breath also helps us to move into the parasympathetic rest, digest, and heal nervous system. So now for everyone, if you could just come back to the sensations of your feet on the floor, your bum on the seat, back against the chair or lying on the floor. Gently wriggle your fingers and your toes. Listen to any sounds in the room that you're in or outside the room. And then when you're ready, slowly coming back to the Zoom room that we're in together. So hopefully we are all now much more regulated, calm, and open to learning. And in this state, we're also more creative. So yeah, if anyone would like to just put in the chat how you're feeling now compared to when we first came into the Zoom room, that would be wonderful to just, if you've got any feedback, and if you want to share how you're feeling now. So just give a few moments for anyone if you want to pop anything into the chat. And if you don't, that's fine too. I'm feeling a bit more present and a bit more relaxed. So I can hear someone saying calmer and tingling, and someone else saying they're feeling more mellow. So thanks for that. That's great. And someone also more present, which is wonderful. Yes, exactly, more present. So, what is a health coach? So, as a health coach, I walk alongside people towards their vision of health and well-being. I help to connect them to their internal and external resources. So, internal resources like character strengths, help them to overcome obstacles and keep themselves accountable and work towards more motivation to set goals to support their health. So, I am a health behavior change specialist using this powerful collaborative model. So, I'm not a medical practitioner who tells you what to do. I'm also trained in the functional medicine approach to health coaching. So, what is functional medicine? Well, it comes from systems biology and it sees the body as an ecology of interconnected systems. It assesses the whole person, so the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual aspects of a person, and looks for root causes for health problems rather than trying to treat or band aid the downstream manifestations of those imbalances in the various systems of the body. So, as I said, I don't diagnose or prescribe, but I help people to make sustainable long term health behavior changes, especially when change is hard for lots of physical and psychological reasons, especially with chronic illness. So, a little bit about my story and how I got to be living my second life. So, in my late 20s, there was, I guess, what you would call a kind of perfect storm of stress from training to be a counseling psychologist, actually in couples therapy. And in that process, some past childhood trauma coming up that I started to address. And I was probably overtraining as well in many physical activities. I was playing touch football, riding my bike everywhere, modern dance and rock climbing. And also a long relationship broke down. And I ended up eventually getting labels of chronic fatigue syndrome, multiple chemical sensitivities, IBS, amongst others. I still remember playing touch football. It was a high level competition on the lush green playing fields of the Adelaide Parklands. And I just had this sudden feeling like I had rocks in a backpack that I was trying to run with, and I just had to come off. And what followed was months in bed, interrupting my career as a counselling psychologist, having just achieved registration through a 6-year pathway. What followed was decades of many different practitioners, endless testing, many different modalities, I imagine, like many of you. There were many fears about my health, my future, and at times I thought that taking my life seemed like the best thing to do. But I still continued looking for answers. And then I came across Dr. Georgina Hale, and she was the first functional medicine physician in Australia. So, as well as assessing me as a whole person, which takes a couple of hours or more, and we did some work on the gut microbiome imbalances, she crucially referred me to a brain retraining program. A few months later, into that intense daily training, I was at a petrol station on the Sunshine Coast and I filled my car with petrol. And for most ordinary people, of course, that's, no big deal. But for the last decades, my carer and my ex-partner had driven me around and filled up the car because I just couldn't be anywhere near any man-made chemicals, basically. I also remember that everything around me, suddenly colours seemed more vivid. They really popped out. Um, I remember being at the rock pool at the community where I lived here, and the splashes of water pouring into the rock pool looking like jewels, and the moss on the opposite bank looking like green velvet. It was just this sudden feeling of being more alive and being more connected to the joy of being alive. I was also able to study again, and I retrained as a functional medicine health coach. So, functional medicine, this is a diagram of the 5 pillars relating to what they call the modifiable lifestyle factors as the foundation of good health according to this functional medicine model. So there's sleep and nutrition and stress management, which, as I said before, I would call nervous system regulation. I would call it movement, in fact, and I'll tell you a bit more about why I would call it movement, and relationships. And that's both to yourself and to others. They're very important. That relationship to yourself, if it's a good relationship, and to others is supportive to health, and vice versa can be not supportive to health if those aren't good relationships. And in a sense, it doesn't really matter, or what I've found and what other functional medicine practitioners have said, that if your relationships are undermining your health, it doesn't matter what else you're doing in those other pillars. It's really, relationships are very important. They're all important pieces, but particularly also the stress reduction pillar. And that was the exercise that we did to start with. Because being in the parasympathetic nervous state, that rest, digest, and heal state, that is where the body can heal. Being in a chronic state of alert and hypervigilance to real and perceived threats, as I was, it sucks all the body's resources, so it actually can't heal. So, for example, when you're in that state, it takes blood away from the gut, so the gut function doesn't function very well. Your sleep can be really poor. There's also something called the hormone steal, where the body, to make stress hormones, will take resources away from the pathways that make the other hormones that we really need in our body for it to function well. So this is a diagram that explains a little bit more about why this stress reduction pillar, or nervous system regulation pillar, why this is so important. So basically, doing that exercise that we did before, it was helping us to be in the green zone of this diagram, which is supportive to healing and growth, restoration. So the whole diagram shows 3 parts of what's called the autonomic nervous system, or you could think of it as the automatic nervous system, because it automatically runs those things like breathing, blood pressure, and heart rate. And this is the 3 parts of the autonomic nervous system according to polyvagal theory. And I know that some of you have had some input already about this, so hopefully this is reinforcing that and maybe saying it in a different way that might go in a little deeper. So this red state is the sympathetic nervous system, or mobilizing our resources to survive. So I just want to say that it's not that the sympathetic nervous system is bad. We need it to do the things that we do in our day. It's just staying high up in that area and not coming back down again into the regulated zone. That's when it becomes a problem. So the green zone in polyvagal theory is called the ventral vagal, because polyvagal theory, the work of Stephen Porges, discovered that there was actually 2 branches to the parasympathetic. So this very important ventral vagal, safely connecting with others, and this blue, which is the other branch of the parasympathetic. So this blue area is the immobilizing of the system to survive. So it's the oldest part in terms of evolution, and it's more of the freeze and play dead to survive from predators. So when we experience chronic stress internally, from infections, from leaky gut, etc., and also externally from, say, mold and other environmental toxins, psychological stresses, and how we actually perceive external situations, we can be triggered into widely fluctuating boom or bust cycles between overstimulation up here and understimulation, which could manifest as shutdown, lethargy, and depression. Or it's possible to be mostly stuck in one state or the other, like basically like a car with the brakes stuck on, or in this zone with the accelerator stuck on. And either way, this chronic dysregulation out of this green zone, whether it's going up and down in one day or stuck in one or the other, this causes inflammation, which affects all the systems in the body and can also result in pain. And there's also the inflammation, which is caused by the physical stressors that we mentioned before, like mold. So the body doesn't prioritize healing because it's focused on surviving when it's going up and down or stuck in one of those two states. So what we want to do is to regulate and therefore widen this green zone so that stresses don't trigger us into these wild fluctuations or keep us stuck in extreme overstimulation or understimulation. This increases our what is called a window of tolerance for stresses, whilst at the same time we can also be working on decreasing the physical stresses like infections and mold, which are affecting our nervous system as well. So we use mindfulness. So what we were doing before with mindfulness of the breath or mindfulness of sensations to recognize what state that we're in. And then we regulate it when we use that knowledge to regulate to be more in the green zone more of the time. So we can notice when we're agitated, short-tempered or anxious, which is sympathetic nervous system dominant, or we're more shut down, numbed, low mood, lethargy, don't want to get out of bed, which is this dorsal vagal part of the parasympathetic nervous system. And then we regulate by using our tools like mindfulness to firstly recognize the signs, as I said, of when we're under or overstimulated. I mean, it's easy to know when you're in extreme fight or flight with heart pounding and sweating and all of that, but just to be aware that if you're just a little bit short-tempered, you know, am I heading more into this state? It might not be right up there, but I might be just peaking up over there. So then we can apply the tools like the mindful breathing or mindfulness of sensations. We can practice more formal meditation. We can use visualizations, which I'll talk a bit more about, and just using the approach of being more present in your body and aware of your surroundings. So a tip for that one would be just to focus on one thing that you can hear and one thing that you can feel in your body as you are breathing slowly and coming back into that regulated state. And there's also things that we can do with others to what they call co-regulate. And that's also really important because this green state is actually about connection with others, safely connecting with others. So our ability to co-regulate with other people is part of being human, and it's really important. So that reaching out for a chat with someone, you know, if it's possible to even go for a small walk together, or cuddling your pet, and that produces oxytocin. And also which is a feel-good hormone, which is really beneficial to our body. And when we were doing the exercise before and we were putting our hands on ourselves, that in itself can produce oxytocin and help us to shift into a regulated state. So obviously, if you're out in public and you don't really want to, you know, put your hands on your body like that, you can even just hold your wrist, and that can help to shift you into a more regulated state. So we were co-regulating when we did that exercise together as a community. So the various supports for my healing journey, which is an ongoing healing journey. And this is based on this 5 pillars of health of functional medicine. So as I said, nervous system regulation, it's been a very important part of my healing journey, using all those tools that I mentioned. I also did the safe and secure protocol, which is based on polyvagal theory. And for people with post-traumatic stress disorder or complex childhood trauma, I would recommend working with a mental health professional if you were interested in doing a safe and secure protocol. They can also do things with you like eye movement desensitization response and something called brain spotting. So just to mention those possibilities. So brain retraining. But the foundation of brain retraining is nervous system regulation. So this was really pivotal for me. I also did all the other things on this list, including the physical treatments with various practitioners, but brain training was the thing that was quite pivotal for me, that made the difference. So brain training is about changing old associations in the brain, or cross-wiring between certain stimuli and activities, and that state of hypervigilance, or what I would call a chronic state of alert. So I did the dynamic neural retraining system program, but there are many others, Gupta's and others. The main thing, it doesn't matter which one, or if you find another way to use these principles of brain retraining. But the idea is to dismantle the old unhelpful neural pathways of thought, feeling, and behavior that were keeping me in a trauma loop, which is nervous system dysregulation. So changing those neural pathways through what they call positive neuroplasticity, so the ability of the brain to change itself in a positive direction, because it can also change itself in a negative direction, which for me was how it got into a state of being hypervigilance to smells. So not all, smells in small amounts are going to be harmful to me. My body is actually resilient and can actually take small amounts, like when I fill up my car with petrol, but obviously I wouldn't live next to an oil refinery. But yeah, the brain had hijacked those parts of the threat mechanisms in the limbic part of my brain, the midbrain, so that those became important to my survival. My brain decided that it had to build bigger connections, stronger connections to keep me safe by making the smells in my environment seem threatening. So using these principles of neuroplasticity and also shifting the brain chemistry every day. So I talked a bit about oxytocin before. So these feel-good hormones like dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins, using them, deliberately evoking them using visualizations of pleasant experiences and memories to make new positive associations with something like, for me, for instance, the smells or movement, so that I can create new neural pathways and teach my brain that moving and filling my car up with petrol is actually safe, by pairing it with that positive neurochemistry that helps build the new pathways. It also is connected to the rest, digest, and heal part directly. So you're moving yourself into that nervous system state by producing those feel-good hormones in your body. So an example would be of me actually before this talk using visualizations to change the stress neurochemistry that was coming up, like cortisone and adrenaline and norepinephrine. So using visualizations of past memories to bring up those good hormones, that positive neurochemistry, and then doing a future visualization, or what some people would call mental rehearsal, of myself doing this talk and pairing it with those good feelings. And with repetition over time, this teaches the brain that for me to talk to you guys is not life-threatening and is actually in alignment with my values. So the next thing, somatic or body practices. So what I was doing with the brain retraining is top-down repatterning. So my brain telling my body that it's safe. So with somatic practices like restorative and yin yoga, hatha yoga, yoga nidra, or eye rest, Another thing I used was something called somatics, which is related to, in the same lineage as Feldenkrais. So the idea is to repattern the peripheral nervous system now. So from the body telling the brain that it's safe. So both directions, top down and bottom up. So those practices, relaxing the muscles and that chronic patterns of tension, and the peripheral nervous system sending the message back up to the brain that everything's okay. So an eating plan. So a supportive diet. So this is really bio-individual. It's really specific to each person. So for an example, for me at the moment, what is supportive to me is a low-carb diet, because I have issues with glucose control, a low-inflammatory diet, which is gluten-free, dairy-free, ultra-processed food-free. But that's what's supportive to me, and that will change. It's not a static thing. And I know I'm not myself a dietitian, but I know that Luann Hopkinson, who has given some input to you guys, she's both a dietitian and she also understands nervous system regulation. Functional medicine talks about food as medicine, and it also talks about food as information. So food can signal inflammatory or anti-inflammatory pathways in the body, leading to basically to health or disease. So in general, from the functional medicine perspective, a whole food, real food, and also eating the rainbow in terms of plant foods, that kind of plan is a sort of a mainstay of their approach to start with, and then they may do more specific functional eating plans. So sleep routine and sleep rituals. This was also really, really important for me to improve my sleep. As Matthew Walker, who's a neuroscientist who I found his book really fascinating, he said that there does not seem to be one major organ within the body or process within the brain that isn't optimally enhanced by sleep, and vice versa, detrimentally impaired when we don't get enough. So, yeah, just to give a little examples, just really setting up a sleep ritual where I'm sure many of you know, getting off devices before going to bed so you don't have that blue light stimulating effect, so that we can increase melatonin, doing those calming practices, somatic practices before bed, having that kind of routine, going to sleep around the same time and getting up around the same time if possible. The brain really likes routine. And there's many other things that you can look into individually for your particular sleep circumstances, but that's just to give you a taste. So, movement. So, why do I call it movement? So, when I was talking before about the associations, when I was doing brain retraining, many of us have associations with the word exercise because of things like post-exertional malaise. So we have that fearful association with it. So I think even just calling it movement, words really matter and can help us to shift associations and shift our neural pathways. So movement, increasing movement. So I really used incremental training to do that. So very, very small steps, baby steps, and then changing those associations, those negative associations that I had with movement, with brain retraining. So it's really great to do something that you love to do or a modified version of it. And scheduling regular times for moving is also, like, the brain again likes that routine. And another tip is to visualize moving in the times that you can't move, because the brain is so powerful. This really actually makes a difference to muscle activity and also teaches the brain that it's safe to move. And tasks of daily living are also movement. And I would also say using, obviously, your inner wisdom to avoid going into post-exertional malaise. But at the same time, not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's it's really helpful, particularly much later on when I was able to start resistance training with TheraBands and visualizing doing that first and creating those positive associations. By doing that, we can create more muscle cells, more mitochondria, which is the energy powerhouse of the cells. It also increases the capacity of the muscles to act as a glucose sink, to absorb excess glucose from the bloodstream, where it can be harmful if it builds up over time. More movement also increases something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which supports new neural connections, to be making these positive connections with movement that we're talking about. It's like this wonderful, self-reinforcing cycle. It also gets the lymph system moving, obviously, to take away toxins and many other things. So, finding ways to bring small amounts of movement into your day. So we were talking before about the functional medicine pillar of relationships. So relationship to self. I found that a big part of the brain retraining was also learning self-kindness, learning self-compassion, learning self-love, being aware of the way that I talk to myself and shifting that to, especially when I was dysregulated, talking to myself like I would talk to a scared 3-year-old. So not admonishing a 3-year-old who's scared. And that's basically what's happening when I'm dysregulated. And just treating myself with kindness. Also connecting with that inner wisdom, and mindfulness is the way to access what I've heard other coaches call the inner GPS, so that you are, tracking that ability to be aware of what's right to try for you. Relationships with others, also so important. And a really important tool that made a difference for me was nonviolent communication or compassionate communication. To be able to communicate my boundaries to other people in a compassionate way. To not feel overwhelmed by other people's needs and demands. When you're in a low energy state, that can be really overwhelming. And to find a way to be safely connected with others in that regulated green zone that we talked about. So we need that for healing, being safely connected with others. That's what we need as humans. It's like there's a dance between the part of our nervous system that wants to keep us safe and the part of our nervous system that thrives when we are safely connected with others. So NVC is also a way to ask for getting your own needs met without demanding on other people. So these communication tools, and whether it's NVC or some other communication tool that can improve your relationships with others, supports your health. And as does the community. So the power of the community for supporting change and improving mental well-being. So when you're able to, and when I was able to, helping others and giving back and bringing joy to other people's lives is good for my own mental well-being and my own healing. And it's the community, it's within community that we heal, that we support each other. So the CCI and Ticna communities, they're really important to help each other in a really positive way. The last one I just want to mention was that I'm doing gut microbiome, have done, and I'm doing gut microbiome rebalancing. And that also supports mood, because many of you would know that many of the neurotransmitters, the feel-good neurotransmitters like serotonin, are actually made there. So there's this gut-brain connection through the vagus nerve that, a two-way street. And treating infections of any sort would be also important, and would be one of the main goals of functional medicine as well. So finally, just coming to my last slide here, just to firstly, in a moment, to ask you if you feel like coming on, or in the chat, asking any questions. And also, Peter and I were talking about what you might be interested in next year in terms of the input that I might be able to give you. So what input or guidance or experience could make the biggest difference in your health journey next year? So as I mentioned before, I can offer some acceptance and commitment therapy, and that was about, living your life in accordance with your values while accepting what's actually going on and finding ways to diffuse from painful thoughts and feelings. Non-violent communication that I mentioned before. I could also do holistic health behavior change in small groups. It's sort of like a small group coaching over 6, 7 sessions. Mindfulness and meditation, positive psychology, self-care and resilience, and obviously brain retraining, but I know there's other practitioners who would possibly be giving more input about that. So yeah, it's been great to share this with you. And if there's, if you think of something that you'd like to ask me about later, you're welcome to email me. But if you'd like to um, ask any questions or any requests, you can unmute yourself and come on screen if you'd like, or put it in the chat. So
Thank you, Kat, for that. That was great. Yeah, it'd be good if people can come online, because it's the time where we like to sort of talk about, I guess, the future as well. Because plenty of those topics, we could almost have one whole session on them, or sort of get together and do a program. And I feel that so many people with so many different illnesses, there's more commonality between us all than there are differences. It doesn't matter whether we've got chronic fatigue syndrome or fibromyalgia or mold toxicity or tick-borne infection sort of stuff. We all sort of seem to be dealing with the same kinds of things. And I've noticed on a lot of the chats with various different groups, the same kind of problems seem to arise. So it'd be nice to sort of be able to do in the future sort of have some practice of all of this. I mean, there's good to have the theory and the knowledge behind it all, but it'd be good to actually have a session where we can actually, as a group, sort of talk about things that we can do to help. And so, like with acceptance and commitment therapy, I know that I did a weekend workshop on that, and that really helped me a lot. There's other things that have helped, which is like understanding a little bit about Buddhism. You don't have to go right into it, but again, that's all about having no expectations and so forth. So we could sort of come together and put together certain sort of programs that actually helps us here and now, rather than waiting on research to be done or the next drug to come out. But certainly the mind-body sort of concept and retraining the brain is extremely important. I've listened to some podcasts, actually from other practitioners from overseas who also have gone through their own health journeys. And one of the big things they also do, and still do to this day in their journey, is this mind-body stuff, this retraining of the brain and so forth. Whereas before, it was also more or less considered, you think you've got it in your head, it's only in your head, why would you do that? But I think it's another big tool that we can all use. So anybody else want to add to the conversation with this?